Have you ever had that moment where you've sent an email update and then realized that none of your team members have read it?
It's not just team members have done it. When I've sent emails in corporate and inviting people to trainings or something, no one listens and reads it. But yeah, it happens to a lot of the time. And it's often actually younger team members that don't read emails anymore. Funnily enough. They come with things like, oh, you know, I haven't read my emails, just WhatsApp me.
It's a gap that's not just annoying, it's really expensive, right? Because when messages are missed, you get rework, you get slower decisions, reduced turnover.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of things that can go amiss, right? The bottom line really is, if you don't get alignment because people don't get the information, you miss out on great ideas. You can't push a project forward. There's a lot at stake, actually. So what you need to do is basically adjust and find different communication ways to be able to capture everyone in the way that they can consume the information.
Exactly. And that's actually the topic of today's episode of The Leadership Effect, because for the first time in history, we got 5 generations in the workplace. And Gen Z, the youngest of them, have actually outnumbered the boomers.
Oh, really?
They have.
That is quite incredible. I bet with that also they're bringing a different set of expectations and behaviors and also values, right? And I can imagine that creates a lot of tension, especially think about us as millennial leaders, right? There are baby boomers, obviously that gap is quite big, but we're trying to kind of like translate what baby boomers mean, translating it to Gen Z, what Gen Z needs, translating it to baby boomers. Kind of like we are the crunch in the middle, it feels.
We are, but let's start with a big myth, because people love to say, oh, generations want different things. But if you look closer, the needs are actually not that different, right? No. We all want meaning, growth, fairness, competent leadership. What changes is more the signal.
Yeah, and I think that is really important to take into consideration is people have different styles and different things. And this is where the different labels are coming from, right? Actually, I spoke with my cousin. My cousin just finished university recently. And she is on the hunt for her first job. And while I was saying like, well, if it's your first job, just get any job. She doesn't think like that. For her, it's much more about, well, the company that I will work for is more about kind of like they need to have the right meaning behind it. They need to be invested in sustainability and so on and so forth. So they have very different things that they need to do.
Yeah, and I think for Gen Z, they also want transparency, immediacy. They want psychological safety and also to be able to flex, how and when. Yeah,
they're not lazy, right? That's what I often say, or they don't have the right work attitude. For more, it's them, they are basically want to work, they want to have value, but they want to do it on their terms. So they have boundaries, but also they want to have the flexible space in terms of when they work, when they log in, and so on and so forth.
But you touched on something, and I do kind of want to pause on that, because that's something I hear quite often. And I even read it like in some articles in newspapers, but especially for the boomers, it's like, oh, it's so difficult to lead Gen Z, they're lazy, they're not work ready. But you're kind of spot on. If you really listen, they're not saying anything that they want to do less. They're just not, they're kind of refusing this presenteeism, like to be in the office all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, like we just been seeing ex-colleagues of us where the note is you have to be back 3 times in the office. That is going to be really long-term, really difficult for them because they don't see as work, they see work as a means of end. They want to have much more enjoyment in life. They want to live their life on their terms rather than be in the corporate treadmill, what we are used to, and certainly what baby boomers are used to.
Yeah. So they want to do things on their own schedule, but with kind of clear boundaries and also balance. So what's the challenges that you see then for millennials or for boomers who are leading Gen Z?
I think one of the things, so I was in Germany the other weekend and I met an old friend of mine, more of a very, not a meeting, but just went into them and we catch up of what are you doing now? Oh, I hear you're self-employed as well. Oh yeah, it's really difficult for me. And I asked him, so what are you doing? So he said, like, oh, I've got a marketing agency. I said, like, oh, that's quite interesting. How is that? Like, do you have employees? Because obviously I thought, like, oh, maybe I can get business from them. However, it was more really around, he find it really difficult to lead all these freelancers that are fresh from university and interns and students, to find the balance of being their friend and being like, hey, buddy, kind of style, but at the same time telling them when things are not working or to set up boundaries. So it's a real balance for them. And it starts with things like, oh, they don't like... Perfect example, they don't read emails, they just WhatsApp me. I, as a baby boomer or as a millennial, I don't want to look on my phone after 8 o'clock and mixing work with pleasure kind of thing. So it is really kind of like difficult to keep that balance alive.
But it's kind of a common story, right? Because we talk to quite a few leaders and they're not just struggling with the new tools, they're kind of struggling with their identity. So it's like, am I supposed to be their coach? Am I supposed to be their friend? And am I supposed to be their boss, right? To your point, right? And the answer is yes, and because you flex between them.
Or all of them, right?
Exactly.
That's the thing. And I want to bring in some research. So Stanford University, there is a lady called Roberta Katz. She spent years studying the Gen Z generation, and some highlights she pointed out. So Gen Z expect constant change. So leaders have to be much more interested and much more forthcoming with the context of the change, with sharing the decisions that have been made and that have led to the change, and update plans openly. So it's more about being really transparent about, all the decisions that are being made as well. But also they are quite pragmatic and they don't take anything that is being said for face value. So they're more likely to challenge authority, basically. So leaders should more invite what we talked about in another podcast about kind of like the consensus, getting their voices into the business, getting more around collaboration, asking more for inputs and creating that moments within a business, obviously as they feel comfortable and as they can, to bring them on board and be able to incorporate that pragmatism.
Yeah. And according to the Stanford study, they also care about impact, right? So it's quite important for a leader to connect, the tasks to the outcome for people. And
to the value as well, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and this is kind of like what I was talking about earlier with my cousin. She looks much more on the sustainability of another company, but also how real it feels. So it's no longer important to, we do here a little bit to kind of like get carbon neutral. It's much more like leaders need to know what impact their company does on the bottom line, not on the P&L, but also what do they do for the environment, what are they doing for society, and so on and so forth. Because that generation, it's much more into these kind of things, and it's more important for them because they're bringing people into this world later on that have to carry our planet, right?
Yeah. And you already touched on kind of the consensus that they need to be able to give input on the final call. And then there's another big one.
It's mental health. So I talked earlier about the flexibility that they're valuing and doing things on their terms. That is all part of their care for mental health. This is a generation that is much more impacted by mental health and also ill mental health. So they are much more conscious about it to keep that up.
And Channel 4's research adds another layer, and that's that Gen Z, they really want ongoing dialogue and not just that one annual, performance review, whatnot, that many companies are actually doing, right? Some of them do 2 a year. And they want transparency around pay, inclusion, and you touched on sustainability. But you see some of this legislation is coming, right? The pay transparency that's coming and so on. And the kicker that you mentioned, they don't automatically trust a leader.
No, exactly. you have to remember, they have grown up in a world of information overload. So trust kind of like has to be earned. And the best way to do that in this case is through consistency. So really repeat the moments that matter and repeat all the good things you're doing, like regular one-to-ones, checking in with them, making sure that you're asking them for ideas and input so that they feel their work is valued and their voice is also valued.
Yeah. But it's really tricky for leaders our age, right? So we're kind of raised in this in-between space between boomers and Gen Z. And some of us always have this always-on work ethic, right? You mentioned kind of answering emails until late. But we also value that purpose and balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they are not necessarily exclusive. So you can still get the Gen Z to be to get on board with it, but just don't go back to your default, what you are used to from your first leader, right? That it was a little bit more command and control.
Yeah.
Really think about how can you incorporate both styles so that you feel comfortable, but also get the Gen Z generation on board.
Yeah. And I guess the key here is curiosity over assumption, right?
Yeah.
And I do want to share like a story, and it's quite kind of more practical on ways of working, but I had two colleagues. So one was about 10 years older than me and the other one was 10 years younger, and I'm a millennial. And we were debating, like, is it okay to call someone on Teams?
Yeah.
I mean, the older colleague, the boomer, was like, of course. And he used to call me all the time. Huh? I just need 5 minutes, and it took 30. But like for him, that was normal. It's like, stopping by someone's desk in the 90s. But the younger colleague, he was like, oh my God, hard no. You never call someone. Like, it's like turning up to someone's front door and just ring the bell. Like you always give someone a notice that you're coming, right? And I was like, well.
But this is not necessarily about generations, right? It's also about kind of like, what is your preferred style? Because I'm quite, when you think about insights, I'm quite red. So I want to get things done. If I want to get something done, I pick up the phone. I mean, how often do I call you and say like, here, Camilla, what do you think about this idea? Rather than pinging back and forth emails.
You do, but you usually send a message first.
Yeah.
So
and
that was the thing, right?
that is kind of like learned behavior, right? So, and also it's a directive in sprawl. So when I think about the colleague, and I happen to know the colleague because Camilla worked in two places together with me, but it was more about, for him, it was used to like, I'm the boss, I'm telling you what to do, and I'll do that more in a directive way, right?
Yeah, I think honestly, he also wanted to get things done. But I think the funny thing was that we started having a discussion on like, what channels do we use to communicate different things, and how do we work together? And we ended up in this like, what, you feel that? Oh, you feel that? But we kind of ended on a common ground. It's like you ping someone first, and then you give them a call if it's urgent. If you ping someone and they don't answer, you give them a cold call, right?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the thing. The goal is the same, but the signals are quite different, and you need to kind of like have an open discussion with your team about what do they prefer, what communication channels do you use for what kind of message, right?
Yeah.
And it's then really notice what happens, right? When you have these conversations and when you make a decision. So then the boomer might kind of like have to lose a phone, or they don't. Who knows, right? The Gen Z teammates don't have to lose the boundaries, but can be more flexible. So we just need to translate sometimes the signal and make the rules visible.
Yeah, exactly. Flex the format and keep the standards.
Yeah, exactly. And ask everyone, get the consensus. What is everyone's style?
Yeah, brilliant.
To your earlier point is kind of like, if you don't ask, you don't know. You're making assumptions.
Yeah, you are. And it's not always generational. It's personalities, and there's a lot of and culture.
Yeah.
Like, don't even get me started on that. But we do have kind of a framework that we use with clients, right? So, and we called it Bridge, because Catherine knows I love my acronyms.
Yes, she does.
But the B is kind of build the context and explain the why. So explain the purpose.
Yeah, and then the R is about reading the room. Note what drives your team.
Yeah, and what drives each person in it. Or if it's stakeholders even, right? The I is for invite voices. So kind of rotate the speaking order and also make sure that those that usually don't speak up like first, that they're also heard or invited to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the D is about design norms. So really think about what are the tools that we're agreeing on, what are the response times that we should adhere to in certain messages or decision-making or situations.
And then the G is for give options. So there might be two paths to the same one common goal.
Yeah. And then E is laced for experimenting, because sometimes you need to test it out a little bit, see how it works, get everyone used to the new format. If it works, amazing. Sometimes you need to make tweaks as well if it doesn't work yet.
Yeah.
And give it time as well, because sometimes these things take a little bit of time to get used to, right? To a different style. Not just for you, but also for the rest of the team.
Yeah, and you learn on the go. It's not failing, it's learning.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What does it say? Fail first attempt in can't remember. Fail. Oh, first attempt in learning. That is FAIL. So there's an acronym for you.
Yeah. Oh, another acronym. I love it. But I mean, the framework, it kind of can make it gives you kind of an approach to the situation. It doesn't necessarily give you the answer, but by using the framework, you can get to the answers.
Yeah. And it makes your job less overwhelming, right? You don't have to be a chameleon to be a leader that is successful or changing your personality. You just need to expand your toolkit, basically.
Exactly. So let's wrap this up with a challenge for the week. So pick a message that you need to send to the team. Maybe it's about a deadline, maybe it's about flexible working, maybe it's feedback. I mean, whatever it is, just try to write three different versions of that message with the different generations or team members in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, authenticity is not about being kind of like consistently the same person or taking the same approach with all the people. But authenticity is about kind of like meeting the people where they are currently without losing yourself.
Exactly. And when you tune that message to the receiver, you don't just get a nicer interaction. You actually get faster decisions, you get cleaner handoffs, you get fewer like do-overs, and you get more people on board.
Brilliant. Excellent. So let us know in the comments, as always, if you tried it, how did it feel for you? What is the learnings that you took away from it? So that's it for the leadership effect today.
And lead with curiosity
and courage.